What up, TCK Potters? Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Sky Guasco. Another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, aka TCK Pod. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at my name, Sky Guasco, SKYGUASCO. And on Instagram, you can find us as well, fantasy football _ TCK Pod. We got a special guest, two guests today, and we're breaking down again the team previews. We're going to kick off in the AFC North. And we've got the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. We have two special guests today. We have Kelly Singh joining us, and we also from Phoenix, Arizona, and we also have Brett Kerwood coming all the way from Nottingham, England, a part of the Quick Snap crew, who we had on for our 200th episode. Ari and Tom a long time ago, but we're 400 plus now, and we're back with the Quick Snap crew. So we're going to bring them in. Kelly's been doing some work with the Commish crew, who you were all very familiar with here on the TCK Pod, and we're going to bring them in just a second. Before I get started, though, we are breaking down the Ravens and the Browns. Once again, if you have not tuned in to the rest of our team previews, please dial it back on the podcast here. We've gone through nearly every division at this point, and we've covered more than half of the league. And what I've tried to do for this series and what we're doing today is I'm trying to bring in fantasy analysts, but of fans of certain teams. I've mentioned it a few times, but y'all know I'm a 49er fan. So it's fun to kind of wear the fan hat and the fantasy analyst hat as well, because as fantasy analysts, a lot of times we have to push that aside. But in this series, we're able to have a little bit more fun, root for our guys, talk about our team, big up the squad, and bring some fantasy value as well. So without any further ado, let me bring in our two guests today. Once again, Kelly Singh from Phoenix and my man Brett Kerwood all the way from Nottingham, England. Brett, it is great to have you across the pond, my man. And Kelly, it's been a long time coming. You and I have actually done some work with the Commish crew, but now you're finally making your debut on the TCK Pod. So I appreciate you both coming in. Thank you very much. Kelly, let's start with you. Tell TCK Potters a little bit about yourself and where we can find all your works.
Yeah, sure. Well, by trade, I work in sales and marketing, and so fantasy football has been a hobby of mine. I've taken that hobby and gone a little extra step this year doing some work with the Commish crew. You can find us at thecommishbrand.com, where I have lifestyle articles versus analyst type articles, but I'm here to talk about my team.
Excellent. Very excited to have you on. Finally, we got connected a while back through the Commish crew, and of course, we love all those boys. But great to have you on their squad, and you have done an excellent job both on the mic and also in your articles. So very happy to have you part of the episode today. And Brett, my man, all the way across the pond, we have started to build our UK, our English fan base and family here on the TCK Pod. We have a few loyal listeners. Shouts out to our girl Megan, of course. Big TCK Pod follower and supporter. She actually plays American football over there as well. And then, of course, with the Quick Snap crew, and we've also had a couple other guys come on over the years from the UK. I had a great trip to London a few years ago, so love it as well. But Brett, it's a pleasure to have you on today too, my man. And clearly decked out in the Browns gear. I had to rep the Browns cap tonight, and I've got the Justin Tucker jersey behind me for the Ravens, so trying to rep everybody. Brett, it's a pleasure to have you, man. How are you?
Very good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. Yeah, you should come back to London sometime. You should come for the
I will.
London games. You coming?
Oh, my man. Yeah, so I went, quick digression, right before the pandemic hit, about 6 months or so, the summer before the pandemic hit in 2019, my family and I went out to London, and then we hit Stockholm, Sweden, which is absolutely phenomenal, and Amsterdam as well. And we had plans to come back, but then the pandemic hit and everything shut down, yada, yada. So as things open up, hopefully in 2022, I will be back to London. But I've got some good family and friends over there, some fantasy football people now as well. So I will absolutely be back to England as soon as possible. So appreciate you jumping on, man. Let's have some fun, and we'll get right into this. Again, breaking down the Ravens and the Browns for fantasy purposes. Kelly, I would love to start with you if you're okay with that, and let's get right into it. We'll start at the top here. So we'll go Lamar Jackson. We'll get Brett's thoughts and my thoughts as well, and we'll just kind of work our way down here. Lamar Jackson, MVP in 2019, comes back last year and certainly still absolutely dominant, but not really until the second half of the season, which I thought was strange, a little bit frustrating in the first part of the season, but dominant in the second half of the season there. Can we expect Lamar to turn back the clock and get back to 2019, in which case he would probably be a value in fantasy drafts right now? Or do you think maybe, we're looking at more of a run game approach and all those kind of things here with the Ravens?
No, I actually don't predict a run game approach this year. It's definitely going to be there. Obviously, he's Lamar. He's known for his rushing. He's one of the best rushers in the NFL. But with the amount of attention that the Ravens coaching staff is putting into their receiving, I find it hard to believe that they're not working on that passing game and making it more of a weapon.
Absolutely. And last year, so Lamar threw 10 fewer touchdowns in 2020 than he did in 2019. And he averaged about 208 yards or less in 12 of his 15 games. So obviously that's a huge depletion in his work. So rushing remains to be his main source of fantasy points. Over the final 5 weeks of the season, though, he averaged about 161 passing yards per game and threw 11 touchdowns and rushed for 430 yards. So again, the rushing is going to be his floor. Do you have any hesitancy drafting him as a top 3 to 5 quarterback? Obviously, kind of Dak is in the mix, depending on your settings. Rodgers, maybe even Watson might be in the mix. But right now, it's basically Mahomes, Allen, Kyler, maybe Dak, and then usually it's Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson. Are you comfortable drafting him up there as a top 3 to 5 quarterback this season?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to kind of touch back on what you were talking about the second half of the season 2. Also, that wasn't just Lamar. We saw that with our running backs with J.K. Dobbins. He had issues until the second half of the season. Hollywood didn't pick up until the second half of the season. So it was almost like things weren't really gelling at all until the second half of the season. I don't think we're going to see that this year, though. And I think I personally would have zero issues drafting Lamar as a top 3 quarterback. And in the leagues that I'm in, I've drafted in about 5 leagues this year. And it's really been between Allen, Kyler, and Lamar. So
yeah. Okay.
I would say you'll have an excellent season should you choose Lamar as one of your top quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree. I'm willing to bank on the bounce back as well. Over that span in the second half of the season, he averaged about 28 fantasy points per game, which is week winning on average. So I'm in on Lamar as well. Brett, are you also feeling the bounce back for Lamar Jackson, or do you think that he might sputter again in 2021?
I'm feeling bounce back. I think I have to agree he's top 3. I'd put him at least 3rd. Yeah, Kyler. I had Kyler in a draft. I think I had in a league with you last year, and he kind of underperformed for me. So if the chances there, I'd take Lamar probably as quarterback 3 in the drafts.
Okay,
behind
so I would imagine.
Allen,
I would imagine you both have Patrick Mahomes number 1. So if you're saying top 3, then who would you have as number 2? Is it Josh Allen or Kyler Murray?
I personally have Kyler Murray, but that's it could be biased being in Phoenix.
Sure, fair enough. And Brett, you too?
No, I would have gone Josh Allen.
Josh Allen, okay.
Connection, yeah, Stephon Diggs connection. If Cole Beasley's there, who knows? But currently, it's Josh Allen for me.
There you go, and Emmanuel Sanders coming in as well, and I think Gabriel Davis takes a big jump there as well. All right, so we're all in on Lamar for 2021. No real surprise there, but I think like when you're at the top for your quarterbacks, especially in Superflex, or if you're waiting to that 3rd, 4th round, 5th round in redraft leagues for single quarterback, you got to make a move there. And I think people are a little gun shy on Lamar Jackson, but I also agree that I am in. Kelly, why don't you take us through the running backs here, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards?
Yeah, of course. I think exactly what you said. People are gun shy on Lamar, which I feel like makes them gun shy on the rest of the star players. They're worried that they're not going to get the touches that they need. But Dobbins, And Gus Edwards are leading the pack, obviously, with Mark Ingram going to Houston. Edwards is going to get a lot more touches than he did last year. He was clutch coming in and making some really big plays. Personally, one of my favorite players to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I am on the bus. I think he's a great value for anybody. However, J.K. Dobbins, man, he is just on fire, especially the second half of the season. He scored, I think, all, if not most of his touchdowns in that second half of the season. So people fade him out, say maybe Sanders might be a better pick, but I'm still on board with Dobbins.
I agree. Quick notes on Gus Edwards at all before we move on to our thoughts there?
Just get on the bus. He's clutch. He makes the plays when they're needed.
I agree. I'm good with Dobbins. I am also good with Gus Edwards. I think Gus Edwards might be J.K. Dobbins is worth the value, but Gus Edwards I think might be a nice value pick later in your drafts here, which I'm going to be looking forward to there. So we'll see what happens. J.K. Dobbins, he had a great rookie year, like a lot of these guys, Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, a lot of these guys. And he scored 9 touchdowns, as you mentioned, 6 yards per carry. So obviously very effective in that offense there. The Ravens led the league in rush attempts. No surprise there. They've had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons from somebody, unfortunately for fantasy owners and running backs, that is Lamar Jackson. So, he's only saw 10 touches per game starting in week 6. Obviously that'll happen earlier this season. If he can get that workload for 14 to 15 plus games, assuming he stays healthy, I think we can see a big bust or a big boom, I should say, for J.K. Dobbins. And just 152 touches last year. So if we can get that to 220, something like bell cow back, he's going to be a beast. And then Edwards, he's had a minimum 133 carries, 711 rushing yards, and 5 yards per carry over his 3 years in the NFL. So clearly he is involved. But this is going to be a committee-ish, but it's definitely Dobbins with Edwards sparing. My concern with Dobbins potentially, nobody's got any pass work. They don't have like a passing downs back in Baltimore, but I'm a little concerned with Lamar Jackson being the, like Kyler Murray being the goal line back, but also Gus Edwards, who's very efficient there as well. So J.K. Dobbins should get work. He should be great inside the 20s, but I'm a little bit concerned in the red zone as well. Brett, how do you feel about J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards?
Well, I kind of missed a little bit of that, unfortunately, so apologies about that. I was going to figure that J.K. Dobbins maybe cracks 1,000 yards this year.
Nice.
I hope he does. It'd be nice to see a young running back like him, or maybe DeAndre Swift, crack 1,000 after what happened to Cam Akers. Edwards will get most of the touches around the goal line-ish. So, but yeah, I think Dobbins will figure as running back 1 for the Ravens if Lamar isn't like having a good rushing game, shall we say.
I agree.
I don't think that'll have to happen.
Fair. And if you end up with a quote-unquote 0 RB start to your draft, if that just happens to happen the way your draft falls to you, Kelly, would you be comfortable with J.K. Dobbins as your running back 1? Right now he's going more of like, a mid to back end RB2. Would you be okay though if you had maybe, let's say, a top end tight end, a stud wide receiver or 2, and then you get J.K. Dobbins as your RB1? Are you comfortable with that heading into the season?
Yeah, I am comfortable with that, especially as we talked about with Ingram. There's just less to choose from at this point as far as depth. So I feel like he's going to get more touches. And just like we were talking about on the goal line, Brett mentioned that Gus is going to handle that.
Right. I agree there. And any other thoughts here on the running backs from either of you two before we move on to the wide receivers?
No.
No, let's do it.
Not for me.
All right. Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman, who I think is kind of taking the fantasy world by storm. I know that I love him and many others do as well. And they bring in Sammy Watkins as well. They drafted 2 other wide receivers last year. They have a lot of bodies in Baltimore, but again, there's not a lot of pie to go around. So how do we feel about Hollywood Brown, Rashad Bateman, and if you want to mention Sammy Watkins as well?
I mean, Hollywood, we had such high hopes. We're like, this is going to be amazing. However, if we look at last year, he barely caught half of his targets. That was frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw, I looked this up, 39% of the Ravens targeted air yards.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting, which is like in the top 3 in the league, I believe.
Yeah, that's huge. Absolutely.
He's getting the biggest piece of the pie, yet he's catching not very many of them. So I would love to see more out of Hollywood. It was disappointing. It's clear in his ADP. He's definitely being faded hard,
Mm-hmm.
which is sad because I'm sure he's a great player. But as a mom, can I throw this in here? Like personally, I feel like he was like, I'm going to do this. I'm great. I'm the best. And then it just kind of went to his head. That's how I view it as a human.
Yeah. And I think that's totally fair. And honestly, unfortunately, he is a great player and he has some huge opportunities. We saw it opening day last year, 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, against the Miami Dolphins, where, first like 3 plays of the game were deep shots to him. I mean, he has that ability. Unfortunately, again, you had mentioned his catch rate is only 58%. That's not going to cut it for any wide receiver, let alone the number 1 on the team, especially when they, are last in the league in pass attempts. You have to make the most of that opportunity when you get any pass attempts from Lamar Jackson. Yards per target were under 8 as well. So again, not that deep threat necessarily that you thought. And that dropped in 2020 from his rookie season. He had 64% catch rate and 8.2 yards per target. So he went down significantly in both categories from his rookie season to last year in 2020. We hope for a bounce back there.
Yeah, for sure. But if we don't get a bounce back, I honestly would not be surprised to see Bateman be the most consistent receiver for the Ravens. I actually would love to see that. It would be very exciting for the team, I think, to have somebody really break out. They're looking for that star receiver. It's just been a long time coming. Making Bateman their first pick is definitely a signal saying we're going to be passing, get ready. He's going to be catching. And I mean, he was averaging 20 plus yards per reception in college over his career. I would love to see that translate to the Ravens. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Rashad Bateman could be the wide receiver 1 before too long. I just think the consistency will be there. I think he's going to be the first downs guy. I think he's going to be the possessions guy and has the ability to take the top off. Whereas I think Hollywood might be better if he's just not a boom bust Deshaun Jackson type, but like more, deep down the field more consistently, I think is probably going to be best for him.
I exactly see the same thing. If he's open down there deep, it's going to be that pass, that magic catch that we've seen and get excited about. But as far as consistency, it's definitely going to go with Bateman. You mentioned Watkins. I don't really know what to say about the addition of Watkins. It was kind of confusing to me. It's not exciting to me at all. I'm actually more excited about having Tylan Wallace. That could be a real steal for the Ravens. So I don't have too much to say about Watkins. If you look at rosters, I pulled up this little nugget. 90% of people have Watkins on their roster. 86% have Tylan Wallace. So it's almost like there's people that are like, hey, I might take this risk for Wallace.
Yeah, and I know that your boys on the commish side are, Josh is a big fan of Tylan Wallace coming out, and I am too. Again, I just think that there's only so much to go around. And Rashad Bateman, to me, is the prototypical number 1 wide receiver, big body, makes big plays in Minnesota. I think he's going to be the one. And then Hollywood Brown, I think, is going to be best as a number 2 although he was drafted as a number one. So I agree there. Again, the Ravens, though, averaged the fewest passing yards per game last year, just 171. So that's clearly not going to get it done. Quick nugget on Sammy Watkins, which everybody already knows, but I will remind you that he missed 6 games in 2020, right? But he has missed at least that many games in 3 of the last 5 seasons. So unfortunately, we all know the talent is there. We all know the first-round pedigree is there from years ago with Buffalo, but we just haven't seen him stay healthy. Now, if he can stay healthy as a number 3 and Rashad Bateman takes that step to number 1 in, say, week 4 to 6, and Hollywood Brown's a number 2, Lamar Jackson can throw the ball. I tell people this all the time. Like, he won the Heisman Trophy at Louisville, not because he was the best runner in college football, but because he was also the best throwing quarterback in college football as well. And I think if they were to upgrade his opportunity, throw the ball with better weapons, he'll be just fine. And, of course, we'll get to Mark Andrews in just a second, but another great weapon. Brett, can you jump in on the wide receivers here really quick, man? Just your thoughts on Hollywood Brown, Bateman, Watkins, anybody else in Baltimore?
I think it was you. Did you say that Bateman you'd figure to be wide receiver 1 sometime soon?
I think he'll take over eventually, personally, yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion, because I think whilst Hollywood Brown has been like good, I don't think he can reach his like that next level for me. And I think Rashad Bateman can actually do that with Lamar Jackson in that offense. Because I had him as wide receiver 4, so to get him at, was it 31 or 27 on draft night? I think
it looks like Rashad Bateman was 27.
Yeah, to get him there on draft night was a very good pickup. I said it was one of the best picks in the first round. They needed a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Marquise Brown, this is his, I think, make or break season. Otherwise, he's just going to get lost in the rotation. Sammy Watkins, he's going to be in my starting lineup for week 1, and then,
kind of the Deshaun Jackson. You put Deshaun Jackson and Sammy Watkins in your lineup for week 1, they go off, and then you probably cut them after that. That's fair. Absolutely. All right. Any other thoughts on the wide receivers for Baltimore before we get into Mark Andrews? All right. Give us Mark Andrews, please.
Mark Andrews is being faded, in my opinion. I'm seeing so many discussions about, Mark Andrews, he can't produce. He's not worthwhile anymore. And I think that's just because of the whole Lamar discussion too. The more people talk about how Lamar can't throw, the less faith we have in the tight ends and receivers. So I am still high on Mark Andrews. He's a Pro Bowler from 2019. It's not like 10 years ago or anything. Yeah. He's still producing. He's Mark Andrews. He's Mandrews. 12 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns. He's clutch for the team.
I agree, and he led the team in yards per game with 50. But again, that number is good for his team. Terrible overall in the NFL. To lead your team with yards per game with only 50 is quite rough, unfortunately. Now, even if he again leads the team, the passing offense ranked last in the NFL. Again, just that 171 yards per game. So I think that goes up. The Ravens are a very, very good team, but like the Chiefs, like the Titans, they are very, very good at what they do, but not good enough to get past the Chiefs and maybe even the Buffalo Bills at this point, who are better all-around squads. So in my opinion, the Ravens have tried to do what the Ravens do for 2 years, and they've come up short. They need to look, even if Lamar is surprisingly accurate too with the way he throws and things. So he doesn't throw a lot of picks. He's not careless. And of course he can run the ball. That number has to get up to 220 attempts minimum. I mean, it seems so silly that their passing is, and look, Greg Roman, who's the offensive coordinator for the Ravens, he was with my Niners forever with Colin Kaepernick and everybody else. I know the scheme with Roman, and look, it took us to Super Bowl too. It works. But the NFL is changing quickly, and Greg Roman style football, although it is effective for 14 out of 16 games, when you play the best of the best in the playoffs, especially deep in the playoffs, they can figure you out and they can corner you in if Lamar can't take the top off. They're going to have to try to do that to get to the next step. If they don't, they're just frankly not, unfortunately, going to get over the hump, in my opinion, even with the great defense and run game and all those other things. So they're going to have to make some changes there. And Mark Andrews can definitely be a big threat, but with the limited workload in the pass game, it concerns me with all of these pass catchers, regardless of who they are.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the key is getting more passes. The more passes, the more we're going to see these talented players really break out and really do what they're there to do. And I have no doubt that Mark Andrews can do that. Then we've got Nick Boyle, who I feel like his primary role is going to be blocking. He needs to be blocking so that Andrews can catch. However, he was just put on the PUP list again.
Yeah.
For that dang knee. So
I think that's more just a lot of the PUP list stuff right now in middle July, I should say early August, is a lot of that stuff I think is just kind of precautionary for now. And it's veterans. If you see a rookie on the PUP list or something like that, like that's bad news because they're not getting the work. They're not getting the work in. Nick Boyle's been around a long time. He knows the scheme. He's primarily a blocking tight end, as you mentioned. Amari Cooper, Saquon Barkley. These guys that are on the PUP list. Stephon Gilmore for the Patriots. They know the scheme. They know what they're doing. They're trying to get healthy for day one. I'm not as concerned today. Now, if we get to like third week of August and they're still on the PUP list and they're not looking for week one, clearly that's a problem. But I think we'll be okay there with Nick Boyle and overall the Ravens.
Yeah, coming back from injury, it's not easy. 2 knee injuries, 2 season-ending knee injuries, and you're going to try and rely on him to block. I think it is precautionary. It's just also scary when that's pretty much the depth of your tight end. So.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that when Hayden Hurst was there and they were both rookies, Mark Andrews was just fine as well. So it seemed to be, even with Hayden Hurst there, who was drafted before Mark Andrews was still getting the work. So we know that Lamar Jackson wants him in the red zone. Rashad Bateman, another big body. And they didn't have another big body outside of Mark Andrews last season that they could rely on. So I think the Ravens take another step. Brett, any final thoughts here on the Ravens, Mark Andrews, or otherwise before we move on to your Browns?
Andrews is probably the best tight end in the division. I have to hold my hands up and say that. He's one of the best tight ends in the NFL currently in terms of fantasy standpoint and from just an actual, just a standpoint of the neutral, just looking at it. I think there's a sort of over-reliance on Andrews, so they've got to bring in like Hollywood and Bateman and potentially Watkins into the offense to make it a bit more dynamic. Because if, like Sky said, if teams figure them out, they can get cornered quickly and they'll be sussed out and they'll be shut down. But if they have that dynamic like offense, so they can either like kill you with the ground game or take over the secondary in the air, then you should be all right.
I will say, Sky, that the Ravens have also improved their O-line, so that could help with the passing. Just give Lamar time to pass.
Hopefully, yeah.
That's
a scary offensive line.
It is, and I'm glad that they made the upgrades because, frankly, when the season ended and they made a couple of trades, I was actually a bit concerned that they were not looking good for 2021, but they have patched some holes and I think they're going to be just fine. And again, Lamar Jackson is just such a difference maker that defenses, have to key on him clearly, which opens up the pass game and the rushing as well. All right. Any final thoughts on the Ravens overall before we move on to the Browns?
Go Ravens.
Go Ravens. Go Ravens. The Ravens are my better half's favorite team. Her favorite color is purple. Spirit animal is the Ravens. Therefore, the Ravens, and Justin Tucker is her favorite player. So there you go. Also, fun fact, and I say this all the time. I don't know how many people know this, but whenever we rep the rare kicker mention in fantasy football, Justin Tucker also sings opera in 7 different languages. So not only is he incredible kicker, but he is an incredible musician and talent overall. And he's on my short list of NFL players I would love to sit down and have a meal with in a conversation. Okay, Brett, you have been patiently waiting. And Kelly, thank you for the breakdowns on the Ravens. Brett, we're going to turn over to you now, my man. Let's start up at the top here and get down with the Browns. We'll start up at the top with Baker Mayfield coming in. You know, again, excellent rookie season, broke all the records with Peyton Manning, everything else. Kind of a down season comparatively last year. Excuse me, bumped my microphone there. And my boy Justin Herbert came in and bumped all of his records out of the way for the rookie season. But again, we only had Odell Beckham for a couple of weeks. Nick Chubb went down for 5 games. A lot of young wide receivers are popping around. First year of Kevin Stefanski. What do you expect here with the Browns in year 2 of Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield here bouncing back after somewhat of a down season in 2020?
I mean, this 2018 season was like euphoria at the time. We was just like, we started to throw Taylor and then Baker came in and it was, we found the quarterback that we've been looking for so long.
For like 30
the Freddie
years.
Kitchens era. Yeah. The Freddie Kitchens era we don't talk about.
Right, fair.
That 16 games we do not talk about. Last year it was pretty solid. I think first half of the season with Odell, I think in some games he did try to force it with him. But I think when Odell went down, it was a lot more relaxed and it went back to like his first year. He was like slinging the ball with confidence. He was moving it about to every single receiver. Landry was getting touches. Sorry. Rashad getting touches. Donovan's Peoples-Jones won the game against the Bengals. And even in the game where all the top 4 receivers went down, I think it was the Jets in week 16. Marvin Jones, was it Marvin Jones or Marvin Hall? Sorry,
Marvin
Hall. Yeah, you're spreading out. I hope it's more of the same this year. So,
I agree. Any specifics on Baker Mayfield? I can let the listeners know that over the second half of the season, Baker played much better. He had 7.8 yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns, just 1 interception. So he played much better down the stretch when they started figuring out Kevin Stefanski. And, you know, my co-host Bobby Lamarco talks about this all the time. It's all about continuity. So in year 2 of an offense with a quarterback, you see tremendous progression with the quarterback specifically and the offense overall. So I do expect that with Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham coming back here. Let's see if we can, look at, again, another, hopefully it's not going to be pass heavy like the Ravens. The Browns are going to be run first and then work off the play action. But as we see in Tennessee and San Francisco, that could be very effective if the quarterback can handle that. And I think Baker was humbled a little bit in year 2, where it was like, look, man, you came out guns a-blazing, you were dominant, whatever, made the playoffs, turned the franchise around, all those things. But the reality is, like, you're not the focal point of this offense. The run game is, the offensive line is, the defense is, and that's what Kevin Stefanski wants to do, which was very successful in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and the crew. So Baker, I think, got a little humble pie and was like, all right, man, you're not the focal point. So stop kind of presenting yourself that way and getting down if you have a bad game or whatever. It's not about you. We're hoping, in a good case scenario, like Jimmy Garoppolo with the Niners, we're hoping Jimmy only throws 18 passes a game, because that means our run game is dominant, our defense is dominant. That's the kind of game we want to play. That's what Ryan Tannehill does, and the Titans are dominant. So if we can keep that for Baker, I think he's going to be just fine. Kelly, any thoughts on Baker Mayfield specifically before we move on to the running backs of the Browns?
I'm kind of proud of Baker for improving upon his passing. I mean, he was known for having a lot of interceptions, and we didn't see that last year. So hopefully that continues for him, and keep it up, big guy.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do expect a big jump for him. Last year, I'll be honest, heading into 2020, I had Baker Mayfield, I think my quarterback 6 or so, which, the hype was real on Baker last year after a rookie season. And then the reality is that clearly did not come to fruition. So we'll see what happens. But I think, he's going as a back end QB2 right now, almost a QB3. And if that happens, I really do think that he can seriously outperform that ADP. So he might be a quarterback sleeper, even with lower volume, but more efficiency potentially. Let's turn on to the running backs here, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Brett, we know that Chubb is the main dog. Kareem Hunt stepped in for him for 5 games last year, played very well, obviously, but I was kind of surprised that he didn't become quote unquote Nick Chubb like we all thought. His efficiency actually went down a little bit because he was the focal back. We saw him with Kansas City. He could definitely be a number one. Incredible rookie season in 2017. But I mean, are you comfortable, first of all, with drafting Nick Chubb in the first round? And then would you be taking that super high end RB2 / handcuff with Kareem Hunt in like the 5th or 6th round on the same team? Last year, I did that in my home league. I drafted Chubb first and then Kareem Hunt like the 5th round, and it worked out. I ended up winning the league. But are you going to take Hunt if you end up drafting Nick Chubb, or do you think this is kind of Chubb's team to rule?
I don't think it's Chubb's team to rule. I think it's like last year, the Chubb Hunt tandem, I think worked really well, especially when Chubb went down with injury for those 5 games. I would love to draft Nick Chubb in any league, because a lot of people would say, he's not one of the better fantasy running backs, but I'd put him up there for 2021. He's going to bounce back from injury. I hope he plays all 17 games. And Kareem Hunt backing him up, it's a very solid full, like a safety blanket for if you draft Chubb, you've got Kareem Hunt to rely on to pick up the slack, and he would pick up the slack very, very well.
I agree. And he has the pass catching upside that Nick Chubb doesn't necessarily have. And Chubb's a great pass catcher. They just don't use him in that role. So when Kareem Hunt comes in, he does have that pass catching role, which obviously helps in half and full PPR. Nick Chubb averaged 106.8 scrimmage yards over the last 2 seasons, and last year ran for 6 yards per carry. As far as elusiveness, yards per game, yards per carry, every metric you want from a pure running back, Nick Chubb is absolutely up there with Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, Saquon Barkley, CMC, Dalvin Cook, whoever you want to mention as a true running back. Alvin Kamara is special for fantasy, but he's kind of a, all around more of a wide receiver too. So I wouldn't put him in that necessarily in that category, but Nick Chubb is absolutely special. And Kareem Hunt goes as an RB2 right now in that quote unquote RB dead zone. But of all those other, I don't know, like, the James Connors, even the Chase Edmonds, Chris Carson, I think I would take ahead of him, but, DeAndre Swift guys, Devin Singletary's, like all these other kind of back end RB2s, RB3s, Kareem Hunt is absolutely going to be the head of the pack for me there, because he's not just a backup. He's going to get his own work. And if Nick Chubb were to go down, Kareem Hunt obviously would have that extra work. He could see 50 plus targets for sure and get that boost again if Nick Chubb goes out. Kelly, any thoughts on the running backs there for the Cleveland?
Yeah, I was just looking at where we had ranked as far as a commish. We're working on a ranking guide right now. Personally, I have Chubb ranked as 5th. Sorry.
Nice.
If I can get my words out.
I like that. As
a consensus, we came to 7. Josh ranked him 11, but that's just Josh. So yeah, I think
Josh, slow down.
Josh,
come on, Josh,
settle down. But I personally picked Chubb 2nd round because I chose a QB 1st round in one of my drafts, and I was very excited about it.
Yeah.
So I spot on with those analysis.
Yeah, I like that. Go ahead, Brett.
Sorry. I would have had Chubb as running back 7 in fantasy as well. So I just wanted to agree with Kelly on that point. So.
Nice. And in Superflex leagues, you're going to probably be able to bring him down in the 2nd round. But if you're in single quarterback leagues, Nick Chubb's going to be a 1st round pick. So I would be comfortable with him there, though. Obviously, he takes a little bit of a tick in full PPR, but in half PPR, I don't think it matters as much. And if you're somehow still playing non-PPR, I would argue Nick Chubb is, I mean, it's probably like Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, Nick Chubb, maybe Dalvin Cook. So Nick Chubb's a top 5 pick overall if you're a non-PPR, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to the wide receivers here, and then we'll get into tight end discussion if there is one in Cleveland. Odell Beckham, again, missed a handful of games once again. But I think the hate on OBJ overall and the discredit for him being injury prone and all this stuff has gone a little bit far this year. I know he's been injured for the majority of the last few seasons. I get it. And he was not effective as much even on the field the last 2 years. However, the type of injuries that he's having are, I don't want to use fluke because fluke is kind of a weird word in regards to injuries, but he got hurt on a tackle on an interception, very rare situation to even be in, and tore his ACL and he was out. Camp reports, and I don't want to get too much into coaches speak or preseason hype videos because everybody looks great right now. But seeing Odell Beckham running at top speed on treadmills currently after an ACL injury is obviously very good news. And it's good to see that with my eyes versus just seeing a reporter for Cleveland say, he's been running and he looks great, like fire him up. I've seen it with my eyes. He looks good. And again, like Baker, what made the Browns special a couple years ago is they started getting some swagger and some cockiness, which the Browns have not had forever. And they got a little momentum and like, all right, we could do this. And Myles Garrett on the back end and blah, blah, blah. Des Ward. But now I think all those guys, well, at least Baker and OBJ, in my opinion, had a little bit of humble pie again. So I think they're kind of like, all right, let's like slow our personal agendas. Let's do what's best for the team. Odell Beckham going out there. He paired up with his man Landry and they couldn't play together last year. I see that bouncing back. And with him going right now as wide receiver 26, in my opinion, is an absolute steal. If you were able to get him, in my opinion, like wide receiver 18 with his upside, that's a steal. He's going a full round later than that. I'm all about Odell Beckham in the, 6th round or whatever he's going in, 7th round. He's probably your RB or your wide receiver 3 at that point. You've got a couple wide receivers, maybe even a quarterback and tight end. He still has top 10 minimum upside, in my opinion. Game-changing ability. Last year we saw in the one game against the Dallas Cowboys him go off, right? And have even even had that reverse down the sideline there, which was dominant. So I just want to kind of take a stand for Odell Beckham that I think it's gone a little bit too far. Brett, do you agree with me that we could see a bounce back from him, or are you worried about these injuries and everything else? And then how do you feel about Jarvis Landry?
Well, I mean, I think Landry, like in terms of how the passing game is structured with the wide receivers, I think Landry is a clear wide receiver 1 because of what's happened to Odell Beckham in the past 2 seasons. Bounce back, I do want to bounce back, obviously. I think he will bounce back, but the past 2 seasons have made me a little worried. And obviously what you said, he did get humbled a lot during the 2019 season and during the 2020 season. The ACL injury was so unlucky, but I think it was. I don't want to sound like a very, very like poor Browns fan, but it kind of helped us in a way because at that point I think OJ was still in the mentality of I'm the guy. I need the most ball. I need the most targets. I need the most receptions. Please feed me the ball, Baker. And he wasn't getting that, and I think he was getting a little more unhappy. So I think if the bounce back's to happen, I think he has to like take a step back and go, okay, I may not be the guy. I've got to turn it down a bit, and I've got to just show what I can do on the field. And what you said about him being like a later round steal, I absolutely agree with. I think he'll be fall into that wide receiver 2, late wide receiver 2, early wide receiver 3 bracket. But yeah, Landry is clear wide receiver 1 on that team.
Wow. I think that's a surprising take. And I don't disagree with you necessarily because OBJ has to prove himself on the Browns. But overall, I think they brought Odell in to be the number one with Landry to be the number two, and that hasn't quite happened yet. So I agree with you there. Kelly, your thoughts on the Browns wide receivers?
I actually am on board with that take. We have him ranked OBJ 30, Landry 31. So that's probably very low as far as Brett's thinking, or maybe anybody else is thinking. No, but
the only thing I'd have
just
said is probably. Go on, sorry, Kelly.
No, I was just gonna say it seems like they're really gonna battle it out. Who's going to be the top wide receiver?
Yeah, I think this season will be that, and I think if it gets a bit too far in terms of like a personal vendetta, I don't think it will get to that, but anything could happen. If it becomes like personal between them, then I think they should I think front office will have to step in and go, stop, team game, not personal game.
And again, I think that is going to be the case, just because, you know, the Odell was obviously the focal point of the Giants for many years with Eli Manning, and he dominated. But he's not. He's behind the run game, two running backs, you know, and kind of small ball, play defense, control the clock. And then you're right, Landry may be the number one, and Baker Mayfield loves the tight ends in the red zone. At least a third of Baker Mayfield's touchdowns in his career have gone to the tight end position in general there. Odell Beckham has had at least 1,000 yards in every season he's played 12 games. So if he can give us 12 games, chances are he'll have some boom games and he'll get over 1,000 yards. Now, it really is health is number one, but if he plays, you know, 12 to 15 of these 17 games, he should have about 80 receptions, probably 1,100 yards, and maybe, you know, 8 touchdowns or something like that. That's going to make him a wide receiver 2 at least. And weekly, although he may have, you know, 4 catches for 26 yards on the Browns, he could have some bust weeks, but he's also going to have some boom weeks as well, because if he's got the speed and the health and the strength, he can still take a slant to the house. He can catch the deep bombs, as we know. And Baker doesn't throw much with Stefanski, but he is accurate. And he's accurate down the field and over the middle as well. So I am a team OBJ this year. I think I'm going to take one more ride with Odell. And this year, what I think is best this year is it's 6th, 7th round draft capital. Last year, I was like, I'm going after it. And it was like 3rd round draft capital. And then he busted and it burned you. This year, it's like half the guys you draft in the 6th or 7th round at any position anyway are maybe not going to pan out. So why not take a guy that could literally be a league winner if he stays healthy for these 15 games plus or whatever there. And Landry always outproduces his ADP in every single season. Jarvis Landry since 2014, every season he's played, he has outproduced his going into the season ADP, average draft position, except for 2. He was hurt one season and then last year. But other than that, he has outproduced his ADP for Jarvis Landry. So he's not an incredible pick, but he's a great look. He's going to get you 6 catches a week, 60 yards, the occasional touchdown or 2. And when he goes off, he's going to obviously return value there too. So a great wide receiver 3, and you're probably drafting him as a wide receiver 4 or 5, even depending on his draft capital. So I like that a lot. Any nuggets on the tight end position, Brett? There's a lot of mouths to feed there. Anybody you're excited about? I see the Njoku behind you. I'm a big Njoku fan. My concern is he's not the guy in Cleveland. I can't wait for him to leave Cleveland because I think he'll be dominant somewhere else. But anything to mention about the tight end position before we get out of here?
I was expecting an Njoku trade for during the 2021 draft. I thought he'd go to a team like the Bills or maybe the Jaguars, something like that, just for a late round pick. But that didn't happen. Austin Hooper, he kind of like fell flat for me during 2020. Harrison Bryant was an absolute revelation.
He's
last
a beast.
Season. He was unbelievable, especially in the red zone and in getting touchdowns. He was at one point, I think he was Baker's favorite weapon for at least a stretch of 3 or 4 weeks.
I agree.
But I think Hooper has to improve massively on what he because the contract he signed is was it? I think it was fairly large. I don't remember the exact details of it, unfortunately. But I think he has to improve and step up his game this season. Otherwise, I think he could lose the starting role, maybe to Harrison Bryant. I think Njoku has not played his last game, but I do hope he gets traded for his sake, because he could be very, very good and very dominant elsewhere.
I agree. And the Austin Hooper trade, when they signed him for the contract they did, it was baffling to me. First of all, I didn't think he was that good in Atlanta. I mean, he's fine. He's a good NFL tight end, but not worth the money they paid him in Cleveland. And then they still had David Njoku, who's, I think he's like Eric Ebron. He like just hasn't come out of his shell yet. We saw Ebron kind of quote unquote bust in Detroit, went to Indianapolis. They actually used him, and he was the best tight end in football. Like, David Njoku is going to be a beast somewhere else next year, or this year. Maybe they have, trade deadline or whatever. So I like David Njoku a lot. Harrison Bryant, I think, will be the number one before too long. And Austin Hooper's the fifth highest paid tight end in the NFL. And if you were to ask anybody to name their top 20 tight ends in the NFL, 20 out of 32, I almost guarantee you Austin Hooper is not going to be on anybody's list of the top 20 for regular football or fantasy football, and he's the fifth highest paid tight end in the NFL. It was a baffling move to me, and we know Kevin Stefanski loves the tight end position in general, with Delaney Walker for years and Jonnu Smith and things in Tennessee, but they're okay in the red zone, but they're not moving the needle much for fantasy football. So Harrison Bryant is a dynasty stash for me. If you have a free square in on your bench in dynasty, maybe David Njoku just in case something happens. But I have no interest at all in Austin Hooper, period.
I think Austin Hooper has to get a lot, like significantly step up, because I think the Jets game, I always go back to the Jets game where we lost all the receivers, and he just wasn't there, or like he just wasn't performing. And I know the whole team was like down a bit, and you thought, all the top four receivers are gone, run the ball, but Stefanski didn't, and he just kept calling the plays of Baker to the tight end. And whilst he did produce a little, he didn't produce that much. And I think that cost us in the long run of that game. And I think Hooper could fall to tight end too before long if Brian continues how he did last year.
Yeah, and I think Bryant will. Kelly, any thoughts on the tight end fiasco in Cleveland?
No, you guys did a great job covering it. I was just like, oh, yes. Good discussion.
Yeah, the Browns are fun, and actually, I know it's cool now because they're good again. But it's been fun watching the Browns turn this franchise around. And obviously, I got the hat. I'm rooting for them, and they're fun to watch. And if Baker can keep his mouth shut and play ball, he's a beast. Odell Beckham, same thing. Chubb is arguably my favorite running back in the NFL. Kareem Hunt as a football player, I'm excited to watch as well. And then Jarvis Landry is just one of those dudes who's kind of the unsung hero every single season, who's outperforming all of his expectations and getting it done. And again, I definitely agree that Harrison Bryant is the best currently on the team. David Njoku moves on. They just don't need 3, and they could get something back for him, 6th-round pick or something. And then Austin Hooper, I think, is just like a good guy to have on your squad, but overpaid, in my opinion, for what they're actually using him for, unfortunately.
See, I think so. That was the same day that they signed the Jack Conklin deal. And it was all a bit like, oh, we signed Jack Conklin, we've got a very good tackle. And it was like, how much did you pay Hooper? Why did you do that?
Yeah, like, oops. But I will say, man, for the Browns and the Ravens lost a few pieces, but they're still the Ravens defense. The Browns gained a few pieces on an ascending defense. Man, Big Ben and Joe Burrow are in trouble. That's all I'm saying, because both of these teams are awesome offensively and excellent defensively. And if the Steelers take a step back this year, which we saw last year at the end, and if the Bengals aren't quite ready for it in general, they could be in trouble. All right, before we sign off here, any final thoughts? Brett, we can start with you. Any final thoughts? If not, no worries. And then we'll get into Kelly and we'll get out of here.
Well, I mean, not really. I just think Jadeveon Clowney signing baffles. But he should be like good, I'd say, mentor for Myles Garrett, and I think Myles Garrett will become like Defensive Player of the Year in that conversation. Offensive line, another year together, and Browns to the Super Bowl. Boom.
Kelly, how about you?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate you asking me to be here. This is definitely out of my comfort zone in a sense that I don't consider myself an analyst, but I do love the Ravens. So fun to talk about them. I think out of all the regular season games, probably the Browns and the Chiefs, I think, are the two that will be the biggest struggle. So it was really fun to hear what Brett had to say about the Browns and banter a little bit.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, it's a pleasure to have you in. Go ahead, Brett.
I would also like to add that I'm very much looking forward to the Ravens games against the Browns. I'm so hyped for those two games. They're going to be blockbuster television.
Agreed.
Brett, have you been to any games in London?
Well, I've been to 3. I went to the Chargers at the Titans in 2018. The last second 2-point conversion that failed from the Titans, and then the 2 Wembley games in 2019, and then I went to America to watch the Dolphins at the Patriots final week of 2019.
Oh, cool. That was a heck of a game too. Absolutely.
And yeah, this jersey was worn in the middle of 65,000 New England fans at Gillette, a very, very cold Gillette.
Well, way to rep, man. Way to rep. Yeah. I'm glad you had fun, and hopefully you'll come back over across the pond and find a Cleveland game someday. Kelly, why don't you sign us out a little bit? We got some glitch. We're across the pond. We're 8-hour time difference here with the UK and everything else. So we got the Wi-Fi signal glitching up a little bit. Not a worry. Kelly, why don't you let us know where we can find all of your work? And of course, you are a part of the esteemed Commish brand these days. So I would love for you to rep the boys. And again, everybody on the TCK pod is very familiar with the Commish crew. We've had everybody on at this point, and I'm so excited to have you on finally as well. You've done some great work, not only with writing, but also on the mic finally. And you know what? You're doing excellent. And I encourage you to keep it up. Follow your passion. You're really good at this, and you'll find your voice and comfortability here shortly. So keep it up, and please let all the TCK podders know where they can find your articles and other work.
Thank you. You're very sweet. You can find my articles, which are, as I mentioned, kind of lifestyle pieces, how to throw a fun party, how to choose the app that works best for you. And right now I'm working on a very fun beer pairings article, which should launch here in the next week. So that's really kind of the content I cover at thecomishbrand.com. And I'm hoping to make more podcast appearances because it has been really fun.
Awesome.
We're also going to be at the expo. We have a booth, the Commish crew.
Yeah.
So you can stop by. I will be your booth gal. Come and say hello.
Excellent. Which is in Canton, Ohio, which is just south of Cleveland, Ohio, by a little bit. So it'll be a lot of fun. Make sure you go check out Kelly at Kelly in Phoenix on Twitter. Excellent follow. And you're blowing up, girl. I got to say, it's fun to watch your growth happening. I know you're sweet and humble about it, but as an outsider, I will rep you. You're crushing it. Well done. And the boys are happy to have you. And I know they're very supportive of you as well. Brett, my man, please rep the Quick Snap crew and what you're doing in the UK, and let us know where we can find your work as well, man.
Scott, Ari, Tom, myself do a podcast. Currently, we're covering all the divisions. We're doing regular season previews. Shout out to Ari for maybe getting slandered on Instagram about his picks for a couple of the teams. Other than that, we've got a great set of guys and gals working behind the scenes for the Quick Snap. If you want to find us, Quick Snap UK on Instagram, type in Quick Snap on Twitter. We've also got a website. We do a few articles. Should have a couple coming out on college football. And yeah, can't wait for 2021. Yeah, that's all I have to say, really.
Awesome, man. Brett, it's been a pleasure, brother. Thank you for making time. Again, we have an 8-hour time difference for me. I'm on the West Coast of the United States, and well, Kelly is too as well, I guess. Arizona's like in that. Is it West Coast? Is it Mountain West? Like it's always, but we're far away, is what I'm saying. We're 8 hours behind you. And I'm just so pleased to have you on, Brett. Thank you for making your debut. Give my love to the boys too. It's been a while since we have had Ari and Time on. We'll have to get Scott on as well and reunite with you guys. But the TCK Potters will go follow at the Quick Snap UK on IG. Follow them on Twitter as well. And of course, you can find Kelly Singh as well at Kelly in Phoenix. Find all of our articles on the commishbrand.com. Y'all know about the Commish crew, and we'll get everybody back on once again ASAP. I want to give a shout out to the Ravens and the Browns. We'll be covering, of course, the rest of the AFC North with the not so Bungles and Steelers coming up as well. So it's been a pleasure. I want to give a shout out to my friends and two debuts here on the TCK pod, Brett Kerwood of the Quick Snap crew and Kelly Singh of the Commish fantasy football team as well. So for my friends, Brett Kerwood and Kelly Singh, I am your host, Sky Guasco. We'll catch you next time. We are out of here.